My name is Nick. I wanted to narrow down the question to one particular. The opposition has brought up analytical thinking, and I wanted to ask for your perspective on how does science compare on this particular playing field in terms of raising analytical thought as a virtue in the people who subscribe to scientific mode of thought. What do you think about that?
What can I say? Essentially we would if you don't think analytically, you can't do science. Okay, so, but that's analytically in the narrower sense, probably, of mathematical thinking. But that's a skill that's very closely allied to what you will find people in philosophy doing as well. Because of course, logic is a mathematical subject; it's not a philosophical subject for a good reason. Yeah, we can debate that one, but essentially, I was taught that logic as part of my computer science course, okay, essentially, yeah, but of course, I don't think a philosopher would have recognized lambda calculus as something they normally do, so there may well be something different there. But analytical thought is clearly part of the way mathematical proof, scientific method, essentially always trying to do that. But I don't think there's a dichotomy there between the arts and humanities, because essentially that has propagated upwards and downwards. And I have to be honest, because much of the analytical thought came from the so-called natural philosophers. The early Greeks, essentially. That's where it comes from. So it was before there were two cultures. Essentially, that's where it comes from. So small wonder both cultures use it.
I would say it's absolutely central, and B, that analytical thought has gone into pretty much every piece of technology that we've ever invented or used. And in that sense, I think, with reference to both this question and the previous one, if you want to remove science from the world, I think it's not enough actually to go back to the Amish. You have to take the Amish people and you have to remove their carts, you have to remove their houses, you have to remove all of the things that were put together with technology which has come from science, which has come from analytical thinking as well.
Thank you. Questions for the opposition? Yes, in the middle. What's your name, sir?
I was found it interesting that you used that quote from Hamlet.
Yes.
Because it seems to me that
sorry, you're going to have
humanities,
to talk a bit because I'm a little deaf in one ear.
it seems to me that humanities are the more specific of the fields in that they focus entirely on human concerns, whereas science focuses on everything else and including that to some degree. Do you not feel that that's seen misused?
I don't understand what you mean when you say science focuses on everything. It clearly doesn't focus on evaluative things that I've been talking
it
about.
studies the universe as a whole, every type of life, humans as a result of that as well. Do you not feel that?
Oh, I see. Okay. So just help me out here, Richard. I'm puzzled by the question. What's the implication of that? Is that because science focuses on everything as you see it, that it's in that sense better than the humanity?
No, it's just that your criticism seems to be that it's narrowly focused.
What, science? Well, I understand it to be narrowly focused, meaning that it works on looking at the world through observation and experimentation. It has a particular kind of method of looking at the world. That's the narrowness, I understand, of science. Whereas there's a lot of other ways of looking at the world that aren't scientific. There's spiritual, religious, evaluative, conceptual, all those kind of things, which aren't scientific. They might feed into science, and scientists sometimes get inspirations from it. Other ways get inspiration from science. But science, in that sense, I think is fairly narrow. It looks at an aspect of the world rather than on the whole range of things that we can do as human beings. So that's why I understand it as narrow. Does that help at all? No? You want to help?
I guess I would want to question the dichotomy that science expresses truths about the world and arts and humanities only express human truths. I think the arts and humanities are just as much concerned with our relationship to the world as science is. And in fact, one of the things I was sort of thinking about when I was deciding what I would talk about is the very popular and really influential television programs that Brian Cox has been doing, and they're easily spoofed. And if you take a look at YouTube, it's been rather amusingly done. But what I find interesting is the way that he seems to appropriate an aesthetic discourse of the sublime, an 18th century discourse of the sublime, and that I think that's interesting because he seems to be, I think the serious point is that an aesthetic relationship to the world, a sensuous aesthetic engagement with the world, might even be the starting point of scientific curiosity or scientific inquiry, but sort of beyond that, in terms of my own argument, that it might be the basis of an ethical, a caring and respectful relationship to the planet. So I think just to get back to your point, I think this dichotomy in between science and arts in terms of sort of the modes of truth telling may be overstated, and the styles of reasoning, analysis, synthesis, these are styles of reasoning that are found in both, and even the styles of creativity.
Thank you. Any questions in abstention? Try it.
I'll be as short as I can with this one. I'll start my point by presuming that indeed we come from monkeys. And I'll just ask a general question. When did the first monkey become a human? Was it when that monkey invented the wheel, or was it when she danced or laughed or sang for the first time?
Start with the proposition.
Chicken and egg problem, right? Essentially, I mean, you probably can't have one without the other, and I'm not enough of an expert in developmental biology to argue which one you need first. I just don't know. I mean, essentially, but I think we've been arguing all the time that completely separating those things from each other is not possible. I mean, essentially, if people who argue that science is absolutely independent of the people doing it, that's clearly not correct. I mean, arguing that it's totally determined by the people doing, as some sociologists have been doing, is not correct either. Okay, essentially. But so you're asking an incredibly difficult question, which is in some sense similar to the question we had before, namely the question: can we completely cut out science or completely cut out the humanities side of things? Because you're again asking the same question, and maybe in a different way. But so the honest answer is I don't know, and does it really matter?
I guess just to add more confusion to it, it also depends on your definition of human as well. So it feeds back into questions of definition. How do you define human? I mean, we and monkeys evolved from some sort of common ancestor millions of years ago, and the change was very gradual. And in such a gradual change, it's really very problematic to ascribe humanity to this generation, but not to the generation before it. And again, it depends on your definition of human.
Thank you. Proposition?
Well, I can't disagree with what was said. I think it's an incredibly difficult question to answer, because the answer is no. And I think it's a combination of self-consciousness. At some point, this ape became self-conscious, developed a language, developed tools, was able to form some kind of society. But how, when, which came first, I don't know how we would even begin to answer that.
That's why it's an abstention.
Sorry?
It's an abstention point.
Yeah. So,
I think the fact that amongst sort of, very early cultures and in all times and places, people have produced culture is a very strong argument against the sort of, virulent kind of case that's made at, nowadays that the arts and humanities are essentially useless or irrelevant. One imagines that they served some purpose once. In terms of definition of, the moment at which one becomes human, perhaps I would have been inclined to think in terms of self-consciousness, consciousness. A problem, which of course, still to this day eludes, neurological and, scientific understanding, so that there's still space for the definition, I guess, from both sciences and humanities of, a crucial aspect of what we take, makes us human.
Thank you. We're running short on time, so we'll have one more question for each side. Question